Now we want to start another topic which is related to interest rate. The interest rate is a rate of return promised by a borrower to a lender. So the first type of the interest rate is called the nominal interest rate. It is the interest rate that we observe in our daily life. For example, when you go to the bank, they report what is the interest rate that they are going to give you for your 3 months deposit. Then that is the nominal interest rate. The nominal interest rate is the rate at which an asset's nominal value got increased over time. The next type of the interest rate that we want to talk about is called the real interest rate. The real interest rate is the rate at which an asset's real value increases over time. Therefore, when you compare the nominal interest rate and the real interest rate, you will notice that the difference between the nominal interest rate and the real interest rate is that the nominal interest rate is about the changes of the nominal value, but the real interest rate is about the changes of the real value. As we learned before, the real value is about the nominal value adjusted by the changes in the price. Therefore, when we want to come up with the real interest rate, we need to consider the inflation rate and take it out. So now let me give you an example. In this example, you receive $100. In the year you receive it, you can go to the market and buy 10 apples. But then somehow you choose to save it, so you put it in the bank. If the listed interest rate is 5%, it means that a year after, you are going to receive $105 back. However, with that $105, what will you get in a year? If the inflation rate is 5%, then it means that the apple price will increase by 5%. Then last year, when you buy 10 apples, you need to pay $100. But then now, after a year, when you buy 10 apples, you are going to pay $105. So then it means that the nominal interest rate is 5% in this case, but the real interest rate that you get is 0%. That is because with the $100 you can get 10 apples, but after a year, even though you put your money in the bank and you got $105 back, you do not be able to buy more apples. Instead, you still can only buy 10 apples. Therefore, in terms of real number of the goods, the real return in this case is 0%, because 1 year before versus 1 year after, the number of the apple that you can get with the money that you receive are exactly the same. So now we can look at the formula for how to come up with the real interest rate. We say that the real interest rate equals the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. So we again notice in here that the real variable is the nominal variable, take out the inflation. In here, the way we take out the inflation is by minus the inflation rate. Earlier, when we are talking about the real variable versus the nominal variables, we take out the inflation by considering the price indices and then do the adjustments. So then you may ask, okay, so when I put my money in the bank, I really want to know what is the real number of the goods that I'm going to get after a year. However, by the time I put the money in the bank, I don't know what will be the inflation rate in the coming year. Therefore, if I can only come up with the real interest rate by using the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate, I somehow do not know beforehand what will be the real return for my investment. In this case, the investment is put the money in the bank. Therefore, is there any way to solve this problem? The answer is yes. So we introduce a term that is called expected real interest rate. In here, we use the expected inflation rate to help us come up with the real interest rate. By doing so, we will be able to know what is our expected real return when we are making a decision about whether or not we want to have the investment. So the main difference between the real interest rate and the expected real interest rate is that when we compute the real interest rate, we plug in the inflation rate that truly happened. However, when we are computing the expected real interest rate, we plug in the expected inflation rate. Therefore, we can say that the real interest rate is something we know after it happens. So we also call it an ex-post real interest rate. However, for the expected real interest rate, we can know it beforehand because we first form the expectation about what should be the inflation rate, and then we plug it in, and then we are going to get an expected real interest rate. For this type of the real interest rate, it is the ex ante real interest rate because it is based on our expectation about the real interest rate, and we come up with the real interest rate expected before it truly happened. Finally, we want to introduce a term which is called gross interest rate. The gross interest rate, that is the uppercase R, equals 1 plus R. In other words, when we have the gross interest rate multiple the principals that we have, and then we are going to have the return of the investment plus the principal that we originally put into the investment. In here, I do not specify whether or not this gross interest rate is a gross nominal interest rate or the gross real interest rate. That is because when we put in the R, that is the nominal interest rate, then the uppercase R will be the gross nominal interest rate. If I put in the real interest rate in the lowercase r in this formula, then it will become the gross real interest rate.